The hearing room didn't feel like a quiet government chamber that morning. It felt like a storm waiting to happen. People rushed in with coffees, notebooks, and half-whispered arguments already forming on their lips. Chairs scraped against the floor, staff members hurried between tables. And the air buzzed with a kind of nervous electricity that made everyone sit up a little straighter. No one said it aloud, but everyone sensed that this wasn't going to be an ordinary discussion. The topic was too sensitive, the public too divided, and the speakers too strong-willed. At the center of all this noise and anticipation were two people who rarely ended up in the same room. Without creating sparks, Jasmine Crockett and Marjorie Greene. They came from different backgrounds, different philosophies, and different ideas of what freedom should look like in a country full of competing voices. They weren't enemies. They just lived on opposite sides of a line drawn by experience and belief. And today, that line ran right down the middle of the committee table. The hearing had been called to examine protest rights in modern America. Not the moral idea behind protesting. Everyone agreed that speaking out mattered, but the complicated reality behind it. Some people said protests had become too disruptive. Others believed protests needed to be loud to make any difference at all. The nation itself seemed torn, and this hearing was supposed to help find common ground, or at least spark a more thoughtful conversation. The room was filled with regular people who showed how personal the issue really was. In the second row sat Lena, a college student with a denim jacket covered in pins from marches she'd attended over the years. She didn't come to cause trouble. She simply believed in using her voice. Next to her sat Ben, a middle-aged business owner who still remembered the night a demonstration spilled into the street near his shop. A few windows broke, not because the protesters meant harm, but because large crowds sometimes move like unplanned waves. He never blamed the movement, but the consequences had still landed on his shoulders. They weren't activists or influencers. They were everyday people who represented two very real experiences too. Sides of a debate that had been growing louder across the country. As the clock struck 9, the chair of the committee called the room to order. Conversations dropped immediately. Phones were put away. Even the sound of someone adjusting their seat echoed across the chamber. The chair spoke clearly and slowly, outlining the purpose of the meeting, to examine how to protect the right to protest, while ensuring public safety and protecting local communities. The goal was balance. But balance wasn't easy when everyone carried a story that pulled them. One way or the other, Jasmine Crockett glanced around the room. Her expression was sharp, focused, but not aggressive. She had spent years listening to people who felt ignored by the system. To her, protest wasn't chaos, was a message. A living, breathing message from people who didn't have any other way to be heard. Across from her, Marjorie Greene sat with her notes neatly arranged. She knew how disruptive a loud protest could be for families trying to work, drive, or run businesses. She believed deeply in freedom, but also in order. Her goal today wasn't to silence anyone. It was to highlight the impact of protests when they became too large, too loud, or too unpredictable, even before the first words were spoken. The room felt split. Not hostile, just tense. Like a rubber band stretched a little too far. The chair introduced each speaker, outlining their backgrounds, but nobody listened closely. People already knew who these women were. They had seen them on news clips and social media. They knew their strengths, their styles, and the way each of them could turn a simple sentence into a spark that lit up a room. When Jasmine and Marjorie exchanged their first glance of the morning, it wasn't unfriendly. It was more like a silent agreement. Let's do this. And let's do it honestly. Near the back, a group of high school students sat in a row, their notebooks ready. Their teacher had brought them here to witness government in real life, not the version they saw online, loud and full of insults, but the version where people tried, even in conflict, to understand each other. The students didn't know it yet, but they were about to see something rare, a debate that was passionate but not hateful, forceful but not cruel. The chair cleared his throat and asked the first question: how can the government protect protest rights while also maintaining public safety? A soft ripple of movement went through the room. People leaned forward. A few breaths caught. This was the moment that tension had been building toward. But before either woman spoke, something shifted, not in the debate itself, but in the feeling of the room. It was as if every person, from the college student to the business owner to the quiet seniors in the far corner, realized at the same time that this wasn't about politics. This was about everyday life, neighborhoods, streets, families, jobs, voices. Someone murmured, "Here we go." And with that, the spark that had been hovering in the air finally caught fire. The next morning, I went to work early, hoping a busy day would clear my mind. But the moment I stepped inside the office, I felt everyone staring. People whispered, paused mid-sentence, and tried to hide their phones. I didn't understand what was happening until my friend Sarah rushed toward me with wide eyes and told me to follow her. We slipped into the empty meeting room, and she shut the door behind us. Her hands shook as she unlocked her phone and showed me a picture. When I saw it, my heart dropped. It was a private message, something I had written to my mom the night before. Somehow it had been posted in the family group chat where my sister, her friends, and several distant relatives could read it. The message wasn't rude, but it was honest. I had said I was tired of being treated like an afterthought, and now everyone had taken it out of context. My sister had replied in the group chat too, acting hurt and dramatic, telling everyone I was attacking her. She wrote long paragraphs about how she was doing her best and I was making problems for no reason. People were reacting with confused emojis, and some were even defending her. I didn't remember sending anything to the group, and I knew I hadn't. Someone else had done it, and only one person had my phone last night, my sister. Suddenly, everything made sense. She had seen me texting, taken my phone when I wasn't looking, copied the message, K, and sent it herself to make me look like the bad guy. Instead of anger, a cold, heavy disappointment settled in me. I didn't want drama, but she kept dragging me into it. I left the office early. My boss saw the stress on my face and didn't ask questions. On the way home, my phone kept buzzing. My parents were calling nonstop, and messages from relatives poured in. Some asked if I was okay. Others told me to apologize to my sister. No one asked what really happened. By the time I reached home, the sun was beginning to set, and the sky was turning orange. My mother opened the door before I could knock. Her expression was strict, not worried. My father stood behind her with crossed arms. They didn't greet me. They didn't ask if something was wrong. They only told me to sit. I stayed silent while they read the message aloud, each word sounding heavier than the last. I explained everything, how the message was private, how I never sent it to the group chat, and how my sister had used my phone without permission. But my parents shook their heads. They said I was imagining things. They said I was overreacting. They said my sister would never do something like that, even though she had done things like that many times before. It didn't matter what I said. They had already chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. My sister appeared in the doorway, pretending to look hurt. She spoke softly, acting like she was the victim. She said she only wanted peace in the family. She even fake cried, wiping the corners of her dry eyes. I watched the performance without saying anything. I wasn't shocked anymore. I was tired, so tired that arguing felt pointless. My parents hugged her and told her not to worry. Then they turned to me and said I should apologize. Not because I was wrong, but because they didn't want negative energy in the house. I walked past them quietly and went to my room. My phone kept buzzing, so I turned it off and threw it on the bed. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, wondering how a simple message had turned into chaos. The house was full of voices downstairs, my sister explaining her story, my parents agreeing with her, and none of them caring about mine. The room felt smaller with every sound that reached me later that night. When everything became quiet, I stepped outside for some air. The cold breeze helped clear my head. I realized something important. No matter how good I tried to be, no matter how softly I spoke, they would always see me as the problem because they never bothered to see the full picture. They reacted to what they wanted to believe, not what was true. When I went back inside, my sister's door was slightly open. I saw her laughing on a video call with her friend, bragging about how easy it was to make me look guilty. She didn't see me standing at the end of the hallway. Her words cut deeply, but strangely, they also gave me strength. It was the first time I didn't feel confused. I finally understood the truth. She wasn't going to stop until she made me look smaller. And my parents weren't going to stop believing her. I returned to my room, closed the door, and sat at my desk. For the first time in a long while, I felt calm. Hurt, yes, but clear. If they wouldn't listen to my words, maybe they would understand my distance. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't want to start fights. I just wanted peace, and I knew I wouldn't find it by trying to please people who never saw my worth. That night, I made a decision that would change everything in the days to come. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next argument. I didn't want to be part of it anymore. I packed my bag, calmly, just the basics, nothing dramatic. I didn't slam the door or make noise. I simply walked out of my room with a clear mind. Downstairs, my mother was making breakfast. She looked surprised to see me awake so early. Before she could say anything, I told her I was leaving for work. She nodded without looking at me, as if she still hadn't forgiven me for something I didn't do. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. And my sister? She walked past me, humming loudly, acting cheerful, like she had won some quiet battle. I didn't react. There was nothing left to argue about. Silence was my answer. When I reached the office, the atmosphere felt different. Sarah was waiting for me at my desk. She looked worried, not judgmental like others. She whispered that people had been talking all morning again. My sister had posted something new, another long story claiming she was being emotionally mistreated at home and hinting that I was the one causing problems. She didn't mention my name, but everyone guessed easily. Some people believed her, others stayed quiet. But the rumor had already spread. Instead of getting upset, I opened my laptop and started working. My mind felt strangely steady. Chaos had been following me for days, and now I finally felt like I wasn't running from it. I was simply stepping out of its way. An hour later, my boss called me into his office. He wasn't angry. He was concerned. He told me he noticed I looked drained lately. He told me to take a few days off if needed. The kindness almost made me break down, but I held myself together. I thanked him and promised I would manage. At lunch break, I went outside to clear my head. I sat on a bench near the office building, watching cars pass and people rush around. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about something I had been avoiding. Distance, not a small break, not ignoring messages, real distance. I wasn't running away, was choosing peace. When I returned home that evening, the atmosphere was tense again. My sister was speaking loudly in the living room, talking to a friend on speakerphone. She exaggerated every story, making herself sound innocent and me sound cold. She didn't know I was standing near the door, hearing everything. My parents sat nearby, not stopping her, not correcting her. They didn't realize how much their silence said. I walked upstairs quietly. But before I reached my room, my father called my name. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask for my side. He simply said, "Try to get along with your sister. She's very stressed." That sentence felt like a lock clicking shut. They weren't going to see the truth because they didn't want to. I went into my room and sat on the edge of my bed. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I grabbed my notebook and listed everything I needed to do. Find a small place to stay. Take a few days off work. Pack only important things. Keep communication polite but limited. For years, I tried to make everyone happy. Now I simply wanted to breathe without stepping on someone's ego. That night, something unexpected happened. When everyone was asleep, I went to the kitchen for water. As I walked back to my room, I passed by the living room and stopped. My sister's phone was on the table, unlocked, with her messages open. I didn't touch it, but the screen lit up with a new text. It was from her friend, asking if the plan worked and whether I had apologized yet. My sister replied instantly, bragging again. She even texted, "She doesn't know anything. I'll keep doing it until she moves out or stops arguing." My chest tightened not with anger, but with confirmation. Everything I suspected was true. She was doing it on purpose. I didn't take screenshots. I didn't confront her. I didn't wake my parents. I simply walked away. The truth was no longer something I needed to prove. I had seen it with my own eyes, and that was enough for me. The next morning, I left early again. Instead of going straight to work, I went to a small rental office downtown. The agent showed me a tiny studio apartment, nothing fancy, but quiet, clean, and mine. When she handed me the keys, I felt something loosen inside me, like a knot that had been pulling for too long. I moved in the same day. I didn't tell my parents in advance. I left a respectful message explaining I needed space and that I would visit them later when things calmed down. I didn't blame anyone. I didn't write long explanations. I simply told them I was okay and needed time. Hours later, my phone exploded with calls. My mother sounded confused, my father sounded annoyed, and my sister acted shocked, pretending she had no idea why I left. I didn't argue. I spoke gently, told them I needed peace, and ended the call politely as I sat in my small apartment that night. Surrounded by quiet walls and soft light, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Relief. The world outside was still loud, full of people who misunderstood me, but in that room, everything was still. For the first time, I wasn't running from a problem. I was walking toward my own life. A week passed in my new apartment, and every day felt a little lighter. The silence that once felt strange began to feel like freedom. I cooked simple meals, cleaned my small space, and walked to work without tension tightening my shoulders. For the first time in years, my life belonged to me. But even with this peace, I knew I couldn't avoid my family forever. Distance brings clarity, but it also brings responsibility. At some point, I needed to face the emotions I had been carrying for too long. It started when my mother called one evening. Her voice was softer than before, almost unsure. She asked if I was eating properly, if the place was safe, if I felt lonely. She didn't mention my sister. She didn't accuse me of anything. She just sounded like a mother who realized something had gone wrong and wasn't sure how to fix it. I answered calmly, telling her I was fine and working on myself. She wanted me to come home for dinner someday, but she didn't push. That small change gave me hope. But while my mother softened, my sister began posting new stories online. This time, she didn't pretend to be the victim. Instead, she acted dramatic, claiming she was losing her family without admitting her role in what happened. People left supportive comments, telling her to stay strong, and she enjoyed the attention. But her words didn't reach me the way they once did. I wasn't inside the house anymore. I wasn't forced into her drama. I could see everything from a distance, and it all looked different, now smaller. Quieter, less powerful. One Thursday at work, Sarah asked me if things were getting better. I told her about the apartment, the silence, the calls from my mother. She smiled, relieved, but then she said something that stayed with me. Space can heal things that arguments never will. She was right. Living apart wasn't an escape. It was a reset. That weekend, I finally decided to visit my parents. Not to move back, not to argue, but to talk with a clear mind. When I walked into the house, everything felt familiar yet distant. My mother hugged me tightly, as if afraid I might disappear again. My father nodded, trying to look stern, but his eyes softened. My sister stood at the far end of the living room, shifting her weight awkwardly, unsure how to act. We all sat down, and for the first time, no one raised their voice. No one demanded explanations. I spoke first, simply because I didn't want another cycle of silence. I told them I needed space, not because I hated them, but because the environment at home had become too heavy. I explained that misunderstandings kept growing, and no one was listening to each other. I didn't blame my sister directly. I didn't list her actions. I focused on myself, my feelings, my need for calm, my choice to step away. My mother listened carefully. My father folded his hands, thinking deeply. My sister looked uncomfortable, but she didn't interrupt. For the first time, she seemed unsure instead of confident. Maybe distance had affected her too. When I finished, my mother apologized, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, real way. She said she hadn't realized how much pressure I had been carrying. My father admitted he should have asked more questions instead of assuming things. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Then my sister spoke. Her voice was low, almost fragile. She said she didn't mean for things to go as far as they did. She didn't confess her entire plan or the messages I saw that wasn't necessary. But she did say she felt left out sometimes and acted impulsively. Hearing her say that didn't erase everything, but it showed something had shifted. She wasn't pretending anymore. She wasn't acting for attention. For once, she was being real. I didn't respond with anger. I simply said I needed boundaries. I told them we could rebuild things slowly, without living under the same roof. They all agreed. After the conversation, I didn't stay for dinner long. I wanted to leave while the peace still felt fresh. As I stepped outside, the evening air felt good on my face. My mother followed me to the door, hugged me again, and whispered that she hoped visiting would become something regular, but only when I felt ready. Over the next few weeks, our communication improved. We didn't talk every day, but the conversations were gentle and respectful. My sister posted less online. My mother checked on me without sounding worried. My father invited me for tea sometimes, just to talk about work or news. Slowly, the tension faded. One evening in my apartment, I sat by the window with a warm drink, watching the city lights. I realized something important. Peace didn't come from fixing every relationship perfectly. It came from choosing the right distance, the right tone, the right pace. It came from understanding that not every problem needs a dramatic ending. Some just need time and space to settle. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't waiting for an apology or revenge or balance. I was simply living, learning, growing at my own speed. And for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. The story didn't end with a perfect family picture. It ended with something quieter: understanding, respect, new boundaries, and a calm heart learning to move forward. And sometimes that kind of ending is the strongest one of all.